The globalist Irish government is to import 1 million migrant consumers and force them into rural Ireland, yet they are closing hundreds of rural police stations and post offices. An Post, which is supposed to be and holds the mandate as the national post office for Ireland, seems to think it is a private or listed corporation where only profit matters and any action is justified which makes more profit. Certainly, it is not following the plans of its bosses, the Irish government, who wants to grow rural Ireland by flooding it with third world migrants. Shortly after announcing the closure of many more rural post offices after 161 postmasters were allegedly offered voluntary redundancy, An Post has the gall to announce that around €10 million will be invested in completely overhauling An Post's digital presence, all of which can be deleted at the push of a button, or zapped in a potential extreme solar flare, or a power failure rendering it useless. They also acquired the domain name anpost.com from a US company for €10,000, despite already having and using anpost.ie. Globalist much? They plan to bring together their 72 websites under one single site. Dublin-based web development company Strata 3 is working on the project, sucking up all the capital. So what we have here is that instead of spending money on local post offices and local people and local resources for local jobs, they spend it all in one go in a central place with one company who have no connection or loyalty to An Post beyond them being a lucrative blue-chip client. This move totally contradicts the Irish government's controversial Ireland2040 plan, which is alleged to be about growing rural towns and increasing Ireland's population by 1 million, despite them having brought in abortion on demand. It is well known, however, that the Ireland2040 plan is a Trojan horse for mass immigration of non-Irish, which are already forcibly being inserted into the very deepest of rural communities. So do migrants and Muslims not use post offices? Guess they will all just be given bank accounts for their ill-gotten welfare payouts. Whilst I find it offensive, many jokes abound of stupid Irishmen and bad planning, and they are even acceptable. The fact is that it is okay to insult the Irish or decimate their country, but don't dare presume to talk about non-whites. I wonder what would happen if there were a few non-white postmasters. Take, for example, the globalist government's project to build massive lovely business parks for their multinational masters like Google, Microsoft, Apple, etc. Offer them extremely low tax rates, but then forget to build accommodation to go with all the new offices. Or did the people in charge stupidly think that only Irish people would be employed by these multinationals? They must have been that stupid because they did not impose any quotas on the greedy multinational corporations with regard to how many Irish must be employed and insist on skill transfer programs, etc. Instead, the multinationals, who have no loyalty to no country, are importing foreigners to Ireland, not caring where they live and certainly not ever bothering to return them to their country of origin, but merely dumping them in Ireland once their visa runs out, or the contract or project is over, or they leave. Believe me, I personally experienced this, and in the end decided to leave Google rather than slave away on the hamster wheel, paying 2/3 of my salary on rent in globalist-infested Dublin. If you are a third world migrant, however, accommodation seems to be no problem in Dublin and is on the cheap. An Post, which last week reported that dozens of post offices will close after 161 postmasters were granted voluntary redundancy, bought the domain from a US company for less than €10,000. They said it is not yet clear where its financial services site will sit, given the heavy regulatory and security requirements for such sites. This sounds like an excuse for a delayed bombshell they will drop when they can bury it in the news flow. Offshoring, perhaps? The new website will be launched in the first half of 2019 and is the latest in a number of steps to modernize the business. In other words, cut costs and make more profit. For instance, last year CEO David McRedman, the former boss of TV3, secured an increase in the price of a standard stamp from 72 cents to €1. You have to wonder how a boss of a media company can so quickly switch saddles to a national post office. Unless, of course, these are all just vehicles for profit and there is no loyalty or dedication to the business core. An Post has deserted its traditional role in society and will be seeking to improve on and expand its digital services. last week announced that dog licenses will be available to buy online for the first time. What next? Will it sell horse race betting slips and become an online retailer for domestic appliances and knock off fashion items from China? They're already in the insurance game. Speaking of China, they at least had the sense to demand that the likes of Google and other multinational corporations invest in skills transfer in their country. So now China is booming and has well-qualified staff to do it all themselves. Meanwhile, the globalist traitors in charge in Ireland are led by their noses and forced to sell out their kith, kin and country for coin with no regard for the Irish people or Ireland. An Post reported an operating profit of 8.4 million for last year, compared with a 12.4 million loss in 2016. It followed a 1.2% rise in revenues to 840 million euros, while costs also fell. So why fix something if it is working? Whatever happened to the idea that redundancies were only allowed if a business was losing money or in trouble? So let's have a look at some specific examples to see how deeply this treason affects rural Irish people. The New Ross Standard, the last remaining local newspaper in New Ross, owned by the deceitfully named Independent newspaper group, had a chat with some of the postmistresses in Wexford, where An Post has facilitated, or rather manipulated, the retirement of postmistresses in Duncannon, Carrig-on-Bannow, Glenmore and Folksmills in County Wexford. Postmistress Caroline Fox broke down in tears as she outlined the torment she is going through over the decision whether or not to take the proffered bribe and retire from a job she so loves. She said most post offices closing over the next 6 months will be forced to do so by stealth. County Wexford doesn't know what will hit it. 3 of the post offices are likely to close by the end of the year, with Folksmills post office also likely to shut. Residents will have to travel elsewhere for postal and bill-paying services. The knock-on effect of neighbouring corner shops and other businesses not even being considered. They, at the EU's behest, will soon be forcing smart meters to everyone's electricity usage, which you can top up at your local distant post office. You cannot go online to anpost.com if you have no electricity, and you certainly cannot wait until when you next go to the closest city, as you have food going off in your freezer. She is quite right when she says Wexford and the rest of rural Ireland has no clue what is about to hit it. 3 post offices in the New Ross area alone are closing their doors for the final time later this year, with a 5th also very likely to close by the start of next year. This is an area which, despite being declared officially as an economically stressed zone with high unemployment, has had hundreds of refugees and migrants forced into it, all with full EU rights and working permits, meaning they can undercut local wages and also draw welfare for their large families. The Kilkenny and Wexford councils are even setting up a no-go zone on their border, where they purchased 4 properties on the same estate next door to each other, at what appears to be well over market price. However, the facts are hard to extract due to their extreme secrecy and aggressive race baiting, or rather Islamo-baiting, where they accuse you of Islamophobia. Is that even a crime? Then set the police on you if you dare to question their actions. This actually happened to 14 people who signed a petition asking for transparency and explanations from Kilkenny Council. Each of the 14 people were interrogated by the police. A phobia is an unreasonable fear of something. I don't think this is an unreasonable fear, given that what has happened in Ireland2040 and so many other communities throughout Ireland and the West, yet only in white countries. Duncannon, Carrig-on-Bannow and Glenmore post offices will close soon, and possibly Folksmills post office will also close its doors, leaving 4 ancient rural communities without a vital service for its residents. Having used Glenmore post office and the neighbouring corner shop myself regularly in the past, there was never a time when I was there by myself. Not that profit should be the primary consideration for a national service, but if you're going to sell kith, kin and country for coin, the agreement reached between An Post and the Postmasters Union has angered many local postmasters. An Post head of retail, Debbie Byrne, said that in the future An Post may consider consolidation of post offices in urban areas, 2 into 1. She expected most of the 161 rural post offices would close, and that the postmasters are being offered bribes between around €6,000 to €80,000, each depending on the length of service. Guess that is not far removed from a hotel owner being paid 3 times the market value for his hotel to accommodate refugees and migrants. All about coin. Following the announcement that 161 rural post offices are being closed, Councillor Michael Whelan called an emergency meeting at Wexford County Council, calling on An Post to adopt a different, more pro-rural Ireland policy. Between Garda stations closing, the lack of broadband, and plans for solar farms, this marks the demise of rural Ireland. An Post has offered our postmasters a sweetener to let them go, and they have an excuse for closing down villages. He said businesses in villages like Duncannon and Carrig-on-Bannow will suffer, leading to a knock-on effect on schools. Councillor Lisa MacDonald said, "This is a direct assault on rural communities. Let me be absolutely crystal clear. Postmasters and postmistresses are entitled to take voluntary redundancy. They have given years of dedicated service to their local communities and should be able to retire with a fair financial package. However, this cannot be used as a backdoor way to post office closures." An Post and the government have been actively seeking to reduce the number of post offices in rural Ireland for years, and have sought to use the redundancy as a smokescreen to bring about closures. She too reiterated that post offices cannot be viewed in the same way as other commercial enterprises. Postmistress Caroline Fox, who has seen it come in and ran for the general election, specifically on the issue of rural post office closures, say there will be at least 10 villages in Wexford without their local post office. That will decimate our villages. It is really the death knell for many communities. The government have quietly sat back and deliberately allowed this to happen. There is no stability for the postmasters who have been offered new contracts. Their future is also uncertain. Post offices, especially rural ones, are almost entirely dependent on social welfare payments. An Post will assess the redundancy applications, as they call it. Why not use the word acceptances? Why pretend it is something they are being asked to do? And determine where forced retirements can be facilitated and their transactions consolidated or centralized to other local offices. Caroline said, "When I took over the shop and post office a decade ago, they were doing well and there was a good living to be made because I got paid for working with the postman and woman. Now I am working here 5 days a week and earning the equivalent of a social welfare payment after you deduct rent, electricity, security and public liability insurance costs." She continues, "I left the Postmasters Union in October 2016 because they put 6 candidates up for the 2016 general election and withdrew them 6 weeks before election day. I was the one who ran and I received no financial aid or support in any way from the union." As a former secretary of the Wexford branch of the union, she said the loss of 3 postmen in her area in 2015 was a devastating blow. People used to come here and pick up their welfare payments, their exam results, birthday cards, etc. at 8 a.m. before the postman left. You'd be open for them and we would always facilitate people at all costs. Describing the new contract being pushed on them as very difficult, Caroline said that despite them marching on the dial and the recommendations from major reports, rural postmasters have not been supported and have been compelled to retire early. She said the introduction of a post office banking network would have saved rural post offices, but the new retail focus An Post has would require postmasters to sell insurance and become more salesmen than postmasters. Nothing new here for globalists then. Incredulously, she said half of the country's postmasters weren't able to vote on the deal because they were not union members. The union described this as a historic deal. To me, it's like Michael Collins coming back saying we are going to lose 6 counties. I am so angry. I have lost tears and sleep, and I am not alone. Other postmasters I know have stomach cramps and diarrhea and have symptoms of stress you can imagine. Caroline closed the shop located beside her post office in July and said although she gets good support from her customers, she doesn't get enough to sustain a business. She said, "People do not realize a lot of the facilities we have. showing me around 20 different plastic containers labelled with everything from accounts to address bell to gift vouchers. People pay their court fines here, get their passport express, send money through Western Union. She said there is no future strategy for post offices in rural areas. 10 rural post offices in County Wexford will be gone within the coming months, including my own. This will have a ripple effect on local businesses as the post office is the main hub in our villages. When Folksmill's post office closes, residents will have to travel as far as either Newbourne, Wellington Bridge or Tagman. The criteria set out by An Post is that people will have to be living within 15 kilometres of a post office. Are they forcing people to buy cars? As you drive into the village, there is a sign saying Folksmills is open for business. This was erected when the gas pipes were laid in 2016. But Caroline fears businesses will be badly affected. She said postmasters provide information to visitors to villages and know their customers, asking a lady how's things with a ready smile as she picks up a registered letter. I just go home these days and I am in a trance. The pensioners are the ones who feel this the most. They are telling me they are lighting candles and putting extra money in the charity boxes, praying to save their post office. We are sitting on this for 3 months and it's absolutely soul-destroying. I don't want this to be my legacy, but it's going to be, Caroline says, breaking down in tears. People have asked me if they can organize a petition, but who can they send it to? Me, as I'm considering taking voluntary retirement. The whole situation is totally unwarranted and wholly undemocratic, and it's going to mean decimation for the Folksmills area. Duncannon's postmistress, Teresa Foley, says running a post office in the area is no longer viable due to the lack of footfall. Teresa has been running the post office opposite the entrance to the beach for 32 years, having taken over from her in-laws John and Mamie Foley. It's hugely difficult, she says. The business has been in the family since 1950. The business is decimated because the community isn't supporting it. This, however, is a bit of a false premise, as a national service like a post office should not have to depend entirely on business. Would you close the schools because they are not profitable, the hospitals because they are not profitable? Why not close the town council offices and police stations? Oh wait, that is exactly what they are doing to exert centralized Marxist control. Technology has played a huge role in affecting business, with pensioners being paid directly into their bank accounts, and they have become more computer literate. Guess we have to be grateful that now pensioners won't get mugged for their pensions outside the post office. They will instead be scammed by Nigerian scammers online who steal their entire life savings. The government knows the internet is not yet fit for purpose, yet they force everyone, including vulnerable children and defenseless elderly, onto it, knowing there will be many victims. Have you ever tried to report a cyber scam, fraud or crime to your local police station, if you still have one? But as long as it plays into the narrative of redistributing the wealth from the West to the Third World, no one dare complain. She also says that as old people die away, they are not replaced by new people. The young people are being corralled into the cities, yet more centrist control of consumer slaves. It was only last year that for the first time ever the urban population of the world overtook the rural population. This changeover happened in Ireland even before that. She said, we have a very small population, whereas Ramsgrange has a huge hinterland. We are backed into the sea. Since the shop closed down, I have noticed it more. Teresa said she considered retiring over a number of months. It is a very difficult decision, as An Post refuses to let anyone else take over the business. So people who have to travel to Ramsgrange. People are upset since news filtered out that it's closing. If you don't support the post office, it will go. It's the end of an era. Carrig-on-Bannow postmistress Nicola Howland has decided to opt for the basic package proffered by An Post. Nicola, like postmasters across the country, has seen her wages fall drastically over the past few years. It's technology that has hit us. People are paying their utility bills online as companies are encouraging them by giving them discounts. We are dying out because of technology. It suits me to take the retirement package because I am approaching retirement age and I can probably manage on what I'll get up until I'm eligible for a pension. But it's difficult on those younger than me. Nicola has worked as a postmistress in Carrig-on-Bannow since the mid-80s. I call postmasters who take up the offer she has between October and the end of January to close her doors. I will be 34 years here next May. It's very sad to go, and it's terrible for the community. But to stay here with the new contract they're insisting on isn't viable. My post office will close down at the end of November. Nicola continues, I am away for Christmas visiting my daughter, so we'll close the post office at the end of November. It has been a nightmare thinking about it. I still get upset over it, and even thinking about it, it's just the way it is. I don't mind for myself. I just think it's terrible for the elderly in the community, she said, her voice heavy with sadness. She said the shop beside her will be impacted once the post office goes, as will the entire village. It will decimate the village if the shop goes. It will be even worse. People don't use their post office, but they will cry about it not being able to use it when it closes. The lack of young customers and the ever-decreasing number of elderly customers has been detrimental to the business's sustainability, Nicola said. During the recession, we were busy because of all the social welfare payments. Now the department are getting people off the dole and putting them in schemes, but it is technology that has ultimately killed us. People no longer write cards or letters, and very few send packages anymore. A lot of postmasters are staying on even though their wages are going down. Some have shops beside the post offices and are afraid business will suffer if they close, and others have nothing else to do. I made up my mind to close rather than flogging a dead horse. It has been very upsetting for a few months. Describing the decision to close so many post offices as stupid, Nicola said she has 30 customers who walk to her doors every day as they don't have transport. They will now have to drive or somehow get to Wellington Bridge 6 kilometres away. Kathleen Hanrahan runs the Glenmore post office, and she has felt coerced to take the retirement package as well. Her daughter says her mother ran the post office for 25 years, adding that no option was allowed for her to take over the running of the post office. Over 150 people attended a public meeting in the village to discuss the matter, and the community has yet to hear if a resolution can be found. Councillor Doherty said having no post office in Glenmore will be a huge blow to the local area, especially after it emerged last week that neighbouring Malinavat post office is also due to close. She said there are also concerns that the shop beside the post office will be affected. So, the Irish government, like so many European governments, is more than willing to bail out banksters and failing corporations and even subsidise refugees and migrants to the extent of purchasing houses for them whilst leaving Irish people homeless, and when it comes to supporting the fabric of Irish rural society, they turn a blind eye. After having worked for 14 years at a top investment bank in London, I have no doubt whatsoever that this is deliberate. It is a globalist supremacist thing called mergers and acquisitions. Now that there are not many companies left to plunder, the elites have turned to plundering countries and their resources by whatever means possible. Citizens and migrants alike are mere profit fodder.